Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning to the viewing and listening audience to the 25th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions, and Statutory Authorities, including the Tobago House of Assembly, the THA. This is the second public hearing pursuant to the committee's inquiry into the occupational safety and health compliance within the public service. This morning, the committee, we are meeting with OSHA, the authority and its agency, the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprises Development, the Line Ministry, and the Ministry of Health. Members of the listening and viewing audience are invited to post or send their comments via the Parliament various social media platforms, that is Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. My name is H.R. Ian Roach. I'm the chairman of this committee. I will invite the other members of my committee, starting on my right, to introduce themselves to you.
Good morning. My name is Khadija Amin. I'm an opposition senator and a member of this committee.
Good morning and welcome. Darrell Smith, member.
Good morning and welcome. Nigel De Freitas, member.
Thank you. I would just like to remind members of the listening public and yourself what is the objectives of this inquiry. One is to assess the level of compliance of public bodies, in particular the ministries, with the provisions of the OSHA Act, to examine the efficiency and effectiveness of the operations of the OSHA authority and its agency, and 3, to assess the adequacy of existing OSHA legislation, policies, and guidelines. I will now invite opening and brief, when I say brief, I mean brief opening statements from 2 minutes at max. You will have an opportunity to expand later on as the inquiry progresses. Okay, so I now will ask Ms. I will just ask you to introduce yourself, Ms. Natalie Willis? Yeah. Yes, and you can make a, you are the acting permanent secretary, Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprises Development. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with this committee on the inquiry into OSH compliance in the public service. The Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development plays a strategic role in creating growth, promoting diversity, and restoring confidence through its critical work in fulfilling government's labor, employment, and entrepreneurship commitments, which impact all sectors of the economy and all ministries and agencies. The work of the ministry has been given greater prominence in national development, especially with the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, specifically Goal 8, which speaks to promoting inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all. Decent work refers to work that is safe, productive, delivers a fair income, and upholds the rights of workers. One of the targets in the achievement of Goal 8 is the protection of labor rights and the promotion of safe and secure working environments for all workers. The health and safety of workers is of high priority to the government, which has been articulated in the government's official policy framework and the National Development Strategy, Vision 2030. To fulfill these mandates, one of the objectives of the ministry's new strategic plan, 2017 to 2020, relates to the creation of a safe, healthy, and congenial atmosphere to facilitate improved overall work conditions and enhance productivity. The ministry's strategic plan 2017-2020, as approved by Cabinet, is centered on a vision of decent work, industrial peace, and opportunity for all. In realizing its vision, the ministry has identified one of its core functions as the improvement of the quality of life through the promotion of occupational safety and health awareness in the workplace and enforcement of OSH standards. The ministry recognizes that although we have made great strides in improving the framework for the management of safety and health in the workplace and the enactment of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, there is much more to do. The time has come for us to review the Osh Act to address its deficiencies, as we have heard from stakeholders at this Joint Select Committee, as well as from our consultative process, which we would have engaged in in Trinidad in March 2017 and in Tobago in July 2017. Further, in an effort to obtain feedback from specific stakeholders, sectoral consultations were also held in July 2017, and a draft interim report and a policy position were developed coming out of these consultations, which is currently being reviewed at the ministry. The amendment of the Osh Act, together with addressing some of the challenges facing the Osh agency, such as accommodation and staffing, are priorities for the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I wish to emphasize that the Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development is committed to working with the Osh Authority to strengthen the agency to improve its function in the implementation and enforcement of the Osh Act. We totally embrace the feedback received from stakeholders through this Joint Select Committee, as well as other fora, in strengthening the framework for occupational safety and health compliance in Trinidad and Tobago, and in promoting a culture of safety and health in all workplaces. Once again, thank you for being able to contribute to this inquiry, and I look forward to fruitful discussions.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Willis. But I forgot to mention that once you go over your time by a minute, there's a $1,000 penalty. So I think you went over by 2. I'm just saying, I mean, the others will be coming after you, will have the benefit of not being able to contain their pockets, but I hope you will have worked with your money to dispense your charge before leaving. So I'll now turn to Mr. Richard Madry, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Health. And you will advise, you heard my commentary about the 2 minutes and the penalty, so you're aware of the penalty now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and good morning also to members of the committee. Not having that kind of money to spend, I will keep my comments very, very brief indeed. I take this opportunity to reaffirm the commitment of the Ministry of Health to complying with and implementing the provisions of the Occupational Safety and Health Act. In this regard, on November 7th, 2017, a memorandum of understanding was signed with the Osh agency to strengthen our partnership in compliance with the Act. It is envisaged that today's proceedings will be insightful towards promoting occupational health and safety throughout the system. Thank you.
Good morning. So, good morning, Chairman, the Honorable Senator Ian Roach, and other honorable members of this Joint Select Committee. The Occupational Safety and Health Authority and the agency thanks the committee for this opportunity to be of assistance in its inquiry into the occupational safety and health compliance within the public service. Osh, in its preface to its written responses, has attempted to provide the committee with a background of Osh, as well as its operations, challenges, and achievements. The proclamation of the Occupational Safety and Health Act marked a watershed moment in the recognition of the rights of workers in Trinidad and Tobago to a safe and healthy work environment. It is intended to prevent or reduce injuries to ill health as a result of accidents and incidents in the workplace. Additionally, the Act provides for the regulation of the safety, health, and welfare of persons at work. Osh is of the firm belief that safety and healthy workspaces benefit not only workers and those which depend on them, but also employees through higher productivity and profitability. This will ultimately contribute to increased economic activity across the national landscape. Osh is firmly committed to its mandate and welcomes any assistance and guidance from the committee in achieving its goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marvelous. I will now invite the Ministry of Labor to introduce the other members of your team.
Thank you. To my immediate left, I will ask
They can introduce themselves, yeah.
Good morning, Honorable Chairman, members. My name is Andre Lavo. I am the Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Labor and Small Enterprise Development.
Welcome.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. I am Sangeeta Bundu, Senior Legal Officer at the Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. I'm Shanmiti Singh Ningsang, Director, Research and Planning, Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development.
Thank you. Ministry of Health.
Good morning. I will ask the members of my team to introduce themselves, starting with the Chief Medical Officer.
Hi, good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Dr. Brian Armour, Chief Medical Officer, Acton, Ministry of Health.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Dr. Ishta Rampasad, Occupational Medicine Specialist with the Northwest Regional Health Authority.
Chair and members, good morning. My name is Dr. Mark Allen. I recently joined the ministry as the Occupational Health Analyst.
OSHA Authority.
Chairman, similarly, I'll start with our Executive Director on the right.
Good morning, Chair, members of the panel. My name is Carolyn Sancho. I am the Executive Director of OSHA.
Good morning, Chair and members. I am Petal John Behrens, Deputy Director, Legal, OSHA.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Corey Harrison. I'm the Human Resource Manager at OSHA.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. I am Indira McFarlane Lee, Secretary to the Board, OSHA.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Franz Brisbane, Acting Chief Inspector, OSHA.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Anastasia Marchand, Research Planning and Development Manager at OSHA.
Good morning, Chairman. I am Farzan Ali, member of the board of Osh Authority.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. I'd just like to remind members, when you are speaking, you activate your microphone, and when you finish speaking, just deactivate it so it can be recorded and not interfere when you're not speaking. The proceedings this morning were along on the basis that we will ask you some questions and require your answer, your assistance as best as it can be. What you say in these proceedings, you know your rights, you are protected, you have the same privileges as parliamentarians while you are giving evidence or assistance to the committee. So fear no evil. Okay, there are no consequences to come from it once you are truthful. Okay, so we will start off by asking some questions. I would like to ask the first question. You know, on the last occasion, we met with the unions and we met with members of the Disability Committee. On the last occasion, we had a very good representation, and it was a very informative interaction. And I saw reviewing the minutes of that meeting, I saw the benefit of having such taking it in the order in which we did, having them come before as members who have interacted with the Act itself and the authority and the ministries. So we will enlighten as to some of the clear, I think, deficiencies and some of the areas of concern, which we will hope that at the end of today's proceedings, you will be able to have it clarified or enlighten us further. Yes? So the first question coming from that is that this came from JITUM, the umbrella union, the Joint Trade Unionists, and they did ask the question. They said that although OSHA Act was passed in 2004, amended in 2006, and the agency established in 2007, to date, the Act has been ineffective. Now, I would like to ask the OSHA to begin with, what is your reaction to that? Is that a true, really accurate statement or inaccurate? If not so, could you enlighten us as to the effectiveness of the Act?
Chairman, in response to that question, there are some challenges definitely that has been experienced by the Osh Authority and agency. I mean, during its relatively brief span of about 10 years, some of the issues that I would want to list, vacancies in key leadership positions and operational positions as well, that would have hampered the ability of the inspectorate to deliver. finding of permanent officers, lack of policies and procedures, a lack of funding and training opportunities for the inspectors, outstanding salary negotiations and payments of gratuity to employees. I mean, those stand out as some of the major challenges that would stymie its ability to deliver. However, since the establishment of the current Occupational Safety and Health Authority, which was in May 2016, it has focused on coordination and collaboration with stakeholders, including the ILO, filling key leadership and operational vacancies, thereby strengthening the agency, strengthening the corporate governance structure through critical human resource policies and procedures, increasing human and the IT resource of the inspectorate, improving inspections and increasing enforcement, which always high on the list, prosecution of occupational safety and health offenses. And I think in that area we probably made the biggest improvement. If I can go on to give some figures, with respect to enforcement activity by the inspectorate, there were 47 and 53 improvement notices issued in fiscal 2016 and 2017. This represents a 262% and a 212% increase relatively over the preceding year. So a definite increase there. There were 1,490 inspections conducted for the year prior, which again represents about a 42.4% increase over the previous year. The health and safety inspector inspections, we usually have a metric where we look at 10 inspections per inspector, that is a health and safety inspector 1, and 5 for health and safety inspector 2. The average for the preceding year was 9.5 for the ones and 5 for the inspector 2. So definitely we're pretty close to our targets there. I mean, put another way, that's about 154 inspections for the agency per month, and a huge increase from the past.
Sorry, Dr. Darren, let me just ask you a question again. The basis of the OSHA authority and its agency is to do what? What is the objective? What is its sole objective?
To enforce as stated in the Occupational Health and Safety Act.
To make work environment safe, right? And therefore, you're giving me some critical information in terms of breakdown to assess its efficacy, its effectiveness. So would you, in answering the question that I asked, would you say it's been ineffective or has it not been effective? And if you have to grade it 100 out of 100%, what would you give it? A passing grade, a failing grade?
I think of recent we have a passing grade, not 100%. Sorry.
Chair, Carolyn Sancho,
sure.
Executive Director of OSHA. The Act, as you know, it was proclaimed that in terms of 2007, and it has been ongoing. However, we've noticed that although there are some areas that are effective, for instance, refusal to work, those areas, employer responsibilities, those areas have been effective. But in enforcing the Act, we recognize, because it was the first time that the Act was actually used, so now we're using it for the first time to see how it works. There are deficiencies. As a result of that, we've embarked on amending the Act. And this took place, well, the first set of consultations for that took place last year, based on feedback from duty holders in terms of how they see the Act and the deficiencies they've identified. We're using that information to now improve the Act. So in terms of effectiveness, I would say 50 to 60% in terms of how effective the Act has been to allow us to enforce. But we're working towards getting it higher than that based on what is happening in industrial establishments now, and also the feedback coming from the people against which we enforce, who we work collaboratively with.
Thank you very much for that. Khadija, you want to, Ms. Ami?
My question is to the chairman of the OSHA board. You indicated improvements in terms of filling vacant positions, improving your human and IT resource. So either you or your human resource manager if you could indicate to the committee the number of vacant positions you still have within the authority and what is required to fill those.
Just for clarification purposes, for the benefit of the public, right? In answering Member Amin's question, there is a distinction between the authority and the agency. So I want to believe that Member Amin wants to know what is the agency's deficiencies as opposed to the board, the authority. Yes? Thank you.
Currently, we have 87 vacancies in the agency out of 152. So we currently operating at about 40-something%. Yeah. The constraints is finances. So that's about it.
Are these positions contract positions?
All our positions are contract positions.
All are. What is the budget of the authority?
The budget of the authority
of the agency?
Of the agency
yeah.
For employment?
General, do you have a general overall budget for implementation? For the fiscal year, you have a fiscal budget?
Well, every year it varies. This last period for the recurrent, I think we had just over 21 million budget for recurrent expenses.
For recurrent expenditure?
Yes. And then we have 2 million for PSIP expenses.
For what? Summary.
2 million for PSIP, developmental projects.
All right. And 21 million has found to be inefficient?
It is inadequate, yes.
Inadequate by how much? By what? What will be necessary? What will be the adequate requirement to have you all up running at 100%, or a certain higher level than 47%? What will be the budgetary requirement?
As the HR manager said, we have 152 positions that have been approved. And over time, I think that just for contract employment alone, off the top of my head, about $48 million it would need for recruiting the personnel that we would need. What we got this particular period was $14.250 million for recruitment. So that would keep us with the 65 people we currently have. And there was a $250,000 excess on that budget, so we couldn't really bring anybody on. So it's really under-resourced in terms of our contract employment.
Yes, Ms. Willis, sorry.
Chair, permit me to add that the ministry recognizing the constraints that the agency is facing, we recently sought to move money from within our other votes in the ministry to put towards the agency's vote for their contract employment.
Like, what could you give a figure?
So that they could essentially bring on approximately 3 to 4 more inspectors.
So that was like $2-3 million or $1 million?
Approximately, I think it was 500,000. 500,000.
So that's more than less than a drop.
Yes.
The thing is, the question I was going to ask, I mean, is almost self-evidentary that the agency cannot be proactive. If it is you are operating so much under an efficiency level, I will see, and I expect an agency of this nature to be proactive as opposed to be just reactionary in terms of responding to complaint, in terms of inspecting and seeing how much compliance and so forth. That is almost impossible. Am I right? You can't shake your head. You have to tell me yes or no to be recorded.
Yes, you're correct.
It is.
Yes.
It is very unfortunate. And the ministry, I mean, as the lying ministry, have you all ever made any approaches to the government, to the cabinet, to improve this budget?
Yes, Chair, but as you recognize, we are operating right now within certain fiscal constraints. While the upcoming budget for the next fiscal, we would we'd have sought to treat with this issue in terms of increasing the allocation to the agency.
What you will be asking for, if you can project what the amount you will be asking? I mean, what member said just now is that you were looking at 48 million to make it efficient, huh?
I don't believe we would be looking at that figure, but certainly more than what they currently allocated, which is approximately 18.8 million.
Member Smith, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. In your submission, you stated that a total of 2,497 complaints have been received by the OSHA agency. I would like to two answers for that. What period was that figure for, and how much of that was split up between the public sector and public bodies and private bodies?
Hi, good morning. It was from October 2016 to March 2018. And of the figures, to total it out for you, it would be about 81 for public. 81.
81 is from public bodies and the rest is from the private?
Yes, from the private.
All right.
Member De Freitas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is to the Osh agency. You just indicated that you have 87 vacancies in the agency. And in the breakdown that was given, out of 30 positions, varying between 1 vacancy and 6 vacancies, there's one that stands out with 32 vacancies. That's Safety and Health Inspector 1. Why is that? Why is that particular position? It seems to me to be key to have so many vacancies in it. Is there something wrong with the job description or the remuneration?
Well, the job descriptions are approved job descriptions from CPO, so that's what we use. It hasn't proven to be an issue in terms of the reasons for not having enough safety and health inspectors. Most of the reasons in terms of why we don't have them stems from lack of funding to employ them. The last funding we got, we employed 7 last year, July. We brought 7 Inspector 1s on and 1 Inspector 2. But based on funding, we then bring people on.
But how key is that role to the agency in executing its work?
It's very key, because those are the inspectors who are on the ground that go out and do the inspections. They do our reactive inspections, and if we had more of them, we'd be able to do proactive inspections as well. So they're the ones that visit the industrial establishments, bring back the data, and enforce the act on the ground.
So then wouldn't a priority be put on that particular post to ensure that you have enough? Because like I said, there's 30 posts outlined here, varying in terms of vacancies from 1 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of managing the finances that are given, would there not be a higher priority put on the Safety and Health Inspector 1, given that key role?
Yes, and we did put priority on it in terms of the positions we intend to bring on first in terms of when we would need them. However, as I mentioned before, the funding is a problem, and also space in terms of where they will sit when they come in, because we're also constrained by accommodation.
Okay.
There's a pickup from where Member De Freitas was asking. The remuneration for the contract workers, is it based on a parity of the public service? Right. Is it private sector or public service?
It's public. We got those from CPO.
From the CPO?
Yes.
And is that posing a problem to attract, apart from it not having the necessary resources, is it also a deterrent of attracting the right type of people to be able to be
yes, sir.
brought on board as well?
Mm-hmm. It is also a factor.
Has the authority, has the agency or the board considered what would have been a more attractive package so as to attract the quality of individuals you would like? You will have such an assessment done?
Yes, we had that assessment done. When our terms and conditions expired in 2012, we had to put a submission towards the CPO recommending what the salaries should be based on the industrial rates and rates around the world for similarly typed positions. So we would have put that forward to CPO since November 2017, I believe, 16.
And what has been the response?
The response, well, the first response we got from the CPO was they were offering a 0% rise for the period 12 to 15 and a 3% rise for the period 15 to 18. We were then asked to resubmit justifications as to why we would be asking for such a rise, and we had provided that in March 17, but we haven't had any response from them officially. The ministry has been liaising with them as well in terms of getting a response to that submission.
Wow. Wow. That's a predicament. Sorry?
Mr. Chairman, my concern is now the agency's ability to investigate complaints because we did have a public hearing with other agencies, including unions, and one of their main complaints is that when they make complaints, they are not addressed, they are not investigated in a timely manner or not investigated at all. So my question to you is it that your human resource shortage is affecting your ability to investigate the complaints you receive, or are there other impediments?
The agency does investigate the complaints. We have the statistics to demonstrate that. The complaints come via, we have a hotline, and that they come through that medium. And people also send in complaints via other means. When we get the complaints are prioritized, and we have set some time frames as to when we should investigate them, depending on the severity. Some of them we make initial phone calls to find out more information, and then the inspectors would then investigate them based on urgency. So we do investigate the complaints. However, because of the shortage of staff, we have an issue. Because we are supposed to have 48 inspectors based on what was approved, 48 inspector ones. We only have 16. So based on that, we have to really prioritize these. We've introduced a system where some of the complaints, depending on how severe they are, we sometimes could close them off via telephone. So we've managed to do that as well to bring down the number of complaints. We had a backlog of 906 complaints last year. Now that is down to 110 based on the fact that we've introduced a system to deal with them so that we could fulfill our duties to those people who do complain.
Could we hear from the chief inspector?
Yes.
What is your reaction to this? How are you able to function with these shortages that's being highlighted here?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What are your greatest challenges at this point in time?
Our greatest challenge in this case will be human resource and finances. At the end of it, with 16 inspectors, with 14 in Trinidad and 2 in Tobago.
Are you the chief inspector?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sure.
So with 14 inspectors in Trinidad and 2 in Tobago, in I think it was February or November last year, we had 210 recorded accidents that came into the agency. As far as we are concerned, that is our priority when it comes in to the agency. With regards to complaints and so forth, we try to prioritize based on our resources. So based on our assessment of the risk level of these complaints and accidents is how we will allocate our resources.
It seems like a major challenge because if member Amin was just speaking about the promptitude and the promptness in reacting to complaints being made. This was a very common complaint coming out from our hearing prior to you all. I mean, how effective this could really be? I mean, in terms, this has this has an immediate effect in terms of work productivity, because if it is that a complaint is made, for instance, in a school by teachers, all right, that there's an imminent danger. And I would like you all to explain before you leave exactly how you all interpret what is imminent danger, because it's a very blurry area in terms of, even from my experience dealing with issues like this from a legal perspective, that will allow persons to be able to leave their workplace and not be subject to be victimized and have to challenge it in court during the issue being resolved. How do you deal with that? How that is dealt with?
Again, like I mentioned before, it is all based on a risk assessment. Now, when you are dealing with teachers wanting to remove themselves from the premises, then we are looking at a refusal to work scenario. And that in itself, from section 14 to 21, I believe, in the Act, deals with refusal to work. And that carries a specific criteria in itself. In that essence, they need to bring the whatever their concerns are to the relevant authorities within a school scenario, if you're looking at that, where their safety and health committee, together with themselves, are to investigate the matter to legitimize their claims. Upon that, if it is that they're unhappy or unsatisfied or their matters were not addressed, then the agency will get involved. That is the process for refusal to work.
But how do you check on the compliance of schools having these safety committees established? What is the status of that? How compliant are the schools in terms of setting up their safety committees? Are all schools compliant where that is concerned?
As far as, to my understanding, no.
No. So what does the agency do about that?
We met with the Ministry of Education recently to formulate a way forward, because we found that a lot of the complaints are coming out to the schools because of the infrastructural problems the schools have. But our aim is really to try not to close down the schools, but to find a way to fix the issue without having to disrupt schools, unless it is imminently dangerous. So again,
sorry, so what do you mean by imminently dangerous? What is there a unified understanding apart from what the dictionary means? It means something about to happen right now. Mm-hmm. Is that how you all look at it?
We look at it that way, but we base it on risk and calculating risk in terms of frequency by severity. There's a table, a 5x5 matrix that you would use to then determine from a numerical perspective how imminent this issue is going to be. That table has a red, yellow, and green in terms of how it is defined, red being the worst and green being it is okay. So based on that risk assessment and using that numerical value, we would determine how imminent this danger is going to be and then take action from there.
Ms. Amim, you wanted to ask a question again, no?
I want to ask the ministry, I mean, you have a policy, you have a law, and then you have the agency's ability to implement. What plans do you have, considering your strategic development plans that you outlined in your opening remarks, to ensure that the agency is brought at least up to a functional capacity to fit in with the plans that you have for labor and development of human resources in our country?
Thank you, Member. As indicated earlier, the ministry, recognizing that the need for the agency to increase its number of inspections and to be proactive, has decided that incrementally we will provide the funding to bring on more inspectors. So we would have provided funding for this fiscal to bring on at least up to 3 to 4 inspectors more.
So can I ask, when do you, in your plan, foresee that you will at least reach 80% capacity in terms of staffing human resource at the agency?
I can't give that.
You have a time. I know you said you had a time frame and you intend to do it incrementally. Mm-hmm. So I expect that by this year you want to improve by a certain amount, and you'll have milestones for every year.
Yes, we do, but okay. I don't have it at the moment.
Can you send it to the committee?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. So we look forward to your response in writing. Now, just to develop further from I asked you specifically about the schools, but what about the ministries, the various ministries compliant with setting up these committees? I have a list that was provided in terms of an answer, and there were at least 22 ministries identified. I don't know if that is all, that is the entire complement of ministries in the public service, but from the 22, I've seen that 9 are not compliant, the ministries and the departments, right? And some of them, for instance, the Service Commission, right, is not compliant. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, not compliant. The Office of the Prime Minister, Tobago Affairs, Central Administrative Services, Tobago, not compliant. The Ministry of Health, who is before us, which I hope to hear something from them with that, not compliant. The Ministry of National Security, Probation Services, not compliant. General Administration, not compliant. Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, not compliant. The Trinidad and Tobago Cadet Force, not compliant. And the Office of the Disaster Preparedness and Management, not compliant. I mean, really and truly. So the Ministry of Health is here, right? So first, let me hear why the Ministry of Health is not compliant when the Ministry of Health has a significant role to play under this OSHA Act.
In respect of just as the situation would have been at the Ministry of Labor, it was important for us to fill relevant positions. As Dr. Allen has indicated in his opening remarks, he has been working with the ministry for the past couple of months. Fortunately, we can say that we have recently come into compliance with respect to the establishment of the committee, and there has been a meeting of that committee. We put our attention to ensuring that we had the requisite capabilities in the ministry to ensure that we could move forward, and we are therefore very thankful that we now have a person occupying the position of occupational safety and health. And that Dr. Allen chaired the first meeting of the committee.
For the benefit of the listening public in particular, and the viewing public, could you tell us what is the requirement of a safety committee? Composition. What is the composition of it that makes it so difficult, it seems, to establish?
All right. I will ask Dr. Allen to respond, please.
Dr. Allen, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair. The Safety Committee would be comprised of members of management and also worker representatives. The intention is that there would be open, honest discourse between the workers who are on the shop floor experiencing the hazards as they see it, and management to get a full appreciation of what is being experienced by the workers, and a meeting of the minds to ensure that these matters are addressed as quickly as possible. So it's a mix of worker representatives and management. At the ministry, we have, across the RHAs, all of the RHAs have health and safety committees, all of them. And also at the Ministry of Health, we have a health and safety committee that is called a steering committee that would receive reports, information from these various committees so that we have oversight over all of what is happening within the ministry.
Is there a number that it must be comprised of? Like, in this mixture, is there a minimum or a maximum number?
The Act requires that once you have 25 or more employees, that a committee is supposed to be established, which we definitely have. We exceed. But what the arrangement is that each facility or division where work is happening, where there are peculiar risks or issues, that there's a committee there. So there would be subcommittees throughout, and the information, as I mentioned, would be fed into the steering committee.
Subcommittees?
Yes.
But is there a requirement that there must be a specialist in health and safety to be on that committee or not? Or
yes.
Somebody with some knowledge of what Act or what is required in terms of the provisions of the Act?
Yes, there would be, and this is where I would function to provide that technical. This is where I would provide that technical guidance and direction to the committee, but the committee members would also be in receipt of training.
No, I'm speaking about throughout the ministries and all the ministries, all they have these committees set up. This is what I'm speaking about, not just the Ministry of Health.
Okay.
All the ministries where committees are supposed to be set up under the Act, right? What are the compositions? What do you need? Are there specific qualifications to be on that committee?
Well,
so I have a committee in Roaches and flying whatever it is association. I have 25 persons. Do I have a minimum of 5 persons be on a health committee? And one of those committees must be somebody who is versed in health issues or a legal person. What is it? Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, if I may be permitted, again, Chief Inspector from the Occupational Safety and Health Agency. There is no specified number as outlined in the Act. However, we do act.
Section 25E we're speaking about of the Act.
Yeah.
Yes.
It speaks about is once you have 25 or more employees, but the composition itself is not specified in the Act. However, what we suggest in our guidance notes and stuff that we issue out when we're doing public sensitization, we give an example of a homogeneous sample where you have both management and worker representatives. And what we tend to also suggest that you have persons from various aspects of the operation. So you get literally a view from every component of your operation, a representative, including employees, their representatives, management, and upper management. So you can all come together and express their views and come to a reasonable conclusion where there are any deficiencies within the organization.
Member Fraser would like to ask a question.
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman. Just piggybacking off of what the line of questioning that the chairman is going down, I remember outside of in other jurisdictions in sort of Canada and in the States, one of the things they do is they have a OSH officer attached to the particular institution who is responsible for ensuring that the institution remains compliant with whatever Osh Act they have in that particular country. And what I'm hearing so far is that there's no specification in our Act, this is Trinidad and Tobago, for an OSH officer, somebody trained, because this is a field of study, so that ministries or private institutions don't have an OSH officer, but you have a health and safety committee made up of staff members and management, so that the discussion when complaints happen could happen at that level. But do you believe that they should have an OSH officer in every single ministry and in every single workplace once you go above 25 employees to make sure that compliance is there all the time in relation to the Osh Act?
Yeah, sorry about that. It is stated in the Osh Act under Section 6, where it speaks to that once you have more than 25 employees, you have to hire a safety and health professional to advise, and that is one of the components of the Health and Safety Committee as well.
But sorry.
But that's what the chairman was asking. If there's someone who's trained in occupational health and safety that is a member of the committee that could help guide each institution in relation to being compliant with the Act. So then if that is the case, so then the next question is, why is it that we have so many ministries and so many institutions not compliant by way of the health and safety committee? So if there's someone there in the institution who's responsible, whose responsibility is to ensure that you are compliant with the Act, then why are all these institutions not having their health and safety committee being set up?
Nobody can answer.
Well, this is an exploration. I don't know that I have an answer, but I can say that having been in a few ministries, this is the first one that I am I clearly recall or know that there is a specific position of occupational safety and health analyst. But in other ministries, we would have tried to address the OSH requirements by placing it, trying to pull together a combination of skill sets, utilizing the Human Resource Management Division and also the facilities and general administration divisions in particular. So I am uncertain whether the Osh Act requires that there be specialists in the field, or whether the function can be performed by persons who acquire relevant knowledge, but whose core function may have been facilities management, HR, or otherwise. I can see that for some small organizations, it might be challenging to create positions, and expensive, to create positions of our dedicated occupational safety and health analyst.
You know, just a follow-up from what you be the line of inquiry. I'm going to come back to Mr. De Freitas just now. But on the last occasion, Mr. Watson Duke was here, and he was quite informative and constructive in his contributions, which I appreciated. And one of the issues he raised, which is in lines of what we are saying here, and I will read, right? He also highlighted the fact that although there is legislation in place, there is no oversight by the agency to ensure the laws are implemented. Would that be an accurate statement?
Well, that would be an inaccurate statement, sir. Quite a lot of the things that Mr. Duke said were inaccurate. When we inspect these organizations, it's during these inspections that we would see whether or not people are compliant. Because of the fact that we have this shortage of staff, we tend to do reactive inspections based on complaints that we get. But we also have, in terms of the organizations or industrial establishments that are higher risk, like the oil and gas sector, we have a unit specially dedicated to them, so we can have oversight over them, even whether they complain or they don't complain. We still have oversight over those higher risk by nature establishments.
So how do you react to this? That there has been an increase in accidents of 124% during the period 2014 to 2015 to 2016 to 2017, demonstrating the agency's inability to ensure OSHA compliance in Trinidad and Tobago. Is that an accurate statement?
No, sir, that is an inaccurate statement. The reason for that being, as of 2016, the agency has embarked on prosecution for failing to report an accident. And as a result of that, we have been prosecuting persons for that offense. And as a result of that, we have had an influx of accidents coming into the agency. And that is why the numbers increased so drastically.
Okay, so the percentage is correct, but the reason
the numbers have
inaccurate.
increased, yes. Because when the new board came in, they put an advert into the newspapers reminding duty holders of their duty to report accidents, because accidents were being underreported. And it also put in the newspapers the penalty for not reporting. Based on that, we had a 124% increase in people reporting accidents to us. And therefore, we then had to step up what we were doing in terms of looking at the accidents. And also, our prosecution rate increased as well over that period of time based on what the board put out. So we did get more because people were reminded of their duty to report. Yeah. But we then put a procedure in place that the board approved for looking at accidents, again, in that prioritizing way of serious accidents as opposed to not so serious ones. So we have a three-tiered system, priority 1s, 2s, and 3s, where we would then look at the accidents and then farm them in terms of how serious they are and how soon we go and look at it. So we had to put a system in place to deal with that influx coming in.
Okay, thank you. Mr. De Freitas.
Thanks again. Just a follow-up question to the chairman. How many people have been prosecuted, or how many institutions have been prosecuted? You said there was a bump, it went up. Do you have a number?
The legal director could answer that question for you.
Hello again. Mr. Chair, members, to date we've had approximately 200 prosecutions from, 2016 or 15 rather, to date. Whereas before that, it was less than 10.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to find out, because I'm starting to see from a holistic standpoint certain correlations. So let me just ask a general question. Anyone can answer. What relationship do you think there is between OSH compliance and general productivity in Trinidad and Tobago?
There is empirically a relationship between those two. If employers would recognize that OSH compliance would increase productivity, then we would have more compliance, I believe. But I think there needs to be that understanding that if you have healthier workplaces and healthier employees, then you would have more work done. But we need to help them make that connection.
And that's why I asked that question in relation to the specialists, the OSH specialists, because there was a sentiment that the cost for certain companies or ministries or institutions to hire OSH specialists to drive that compliance. Mm-hmm. There may be a deterrence because of the cost. It's a specialist industry, so obviously the remuneration might be high. Mm-hmm. But when you weigh that against productivity, mm-hmm. which is tied to profits, mm-hmm. you realize then no cost may be too high, obviously, when you do your economics, but you realize that it's really important to have a specialist in every single institution to drive compliance so that your productivity goes up and subsequently where this comes into play, your profit goes up. So, you know, there isn't much more that could be said in that. I think that's just really important to be stated.
Could you switch off your mic for me, please? Yeah. Now, we also had a complaint of the lack of compliance, in particular with dealing with Section 26 of the Act, which deals with the means of escape in case of fire. Can anybody throw some light on the accuracy of that?
The Fire Authority, or the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Services, is the authority on fire in Trinidad and Tobago. However, we, the OSH agency, are basically the enforcers of that piece of legislation. So at the end of it, fire certificate, which is a requirement under Section 26, it doesn't necessarily mean that it poses a great danger or a risk to the environment. The environment or the hazards have to be of such a nature that will cause a situation that will make it imminent, that can cause individuals to leave a building. But other than that, there is no really great danger with regards to a fire certificate, because it only clearly identifies as an institution what is required for your building.
No. What Section 26 deals with, right? The means of escape in case of fire, having fire escapes, right?
Yeah.
So is that by and large complied with in many of these buildings?
In most industrial establishments, yes.
Do you all carry out specific investigations to deal with that requirement?
On every visit that we go to, sir.
Is this building compliant?
Well, until we have done an exercise on this building, then we will be able to answer that question, sir.
So how do you prioritize dealing with the specific public entities that you're going to visit to determine whether or not they are compliant or not? Do you have a list or something like that?
Again, sir, it's based on our prioritization system and based on our hierarchy of risk. Most of our public agencies are not classified as high risk.
What will be classified as high risk?
Any organization where we are looking at we can have multiple fatalities or multiple critical injuries.
So it has nothing to do with the stories, how high a building is or anything like that?
No, sir.
But I think that would be a criteria?
Not necessarily, because you could have, let's say for this building we have 15 stories, but once you have met the criteria and you have been issued a fire certificate and so forth that outlines the criteria, you have a means of escape, you have a means of against protection from a fire and so forth. You have your individuals, your wardens and stuff set out as outlined in a fire certificate.
what you are saying basically, a fire escape is just one element of a
One,
number
just
of
one.
things.
Just one.
One thing you look at. You want to ask a question,
Yes,
Mr.
Chair, what we should ask is, what are the common types of risks? Because we only know about fire and certain things. What are the common risks that you all see in particular?
In most of the buildings, we look at leaking roofs and so forth, where we have exposure to some form of biological agents, where we have mold-like substances, as we like to call it, that are formulated. We have basic trip, slips, and falls. Electrical issues as well. Some of these places have not been certified by the Government Electrical Inspectorate, which is now mandated for every 5 years. And those are basic. Most of the stuff is basic institutions. Lack of maintenance of machinery, lack of maintenance of plant of the place of work. Sometimes it's just storage. How you store. I can speak for some public and government agencies. Storage is an issue, so they store stuff according to where they find a space. And sometimes that in itself hinders your access and egress.
One of the complaints that came before us, I think, was from, if my memory serves me right, from President of the PSA, because he was very active in the last year or two in terms of engaging with OSHA, the government, and his membership in terms of closing down buildings. I know the Immigration Department was one, the BIR was one, and what you were saying that in some instances you have fraudulent fire certificates that were being issued. Did you look into? Did you get out of an official complaint, and did you all look into it?
We haven't had that as an official complaint. The fire certificates would tend to come from the fire authority. They're responsible for doing that, but we haven't had it as an official complaint. The process that Mr. Duke used for vacating buildings was was the wrong one. It didn't follow the process that you would use if you were trying to close a building down. As a matter of fact, Mr. Duke's headquarters right now is not compliant, and we have that filed that in court in March for both his number 89 and 91 buildings. Those two buildings are now before the industrial court for non-compliance as of March. So, yes.
But what will promote the agency to close down an agency for non-compliance? How severe? What is your criteria? How severe it must be before you issue a closing down certificate or something like that, or mandate?
Again, that will fall for us to issue a prohibition notice.
Right.
It will be for two reasons and two reasons only. If it is that we had previously visited the premises, and we had given you a time frame in which to rectify these issues, and upon our re-inspection, we recognize that it was not complied with, we may issue a prohibition notice in that regard. Or if it is that what we classify as imminent danger, where life or limb of an individual is threatened, then we will issue a prohibition notice to that effect.
Thank you, Ms. Amin.
Mr. Chairman, very often in the public domain, we hear different unions make complaints or threats to shut down buildings because they are not compliant with the OSHA regulations. We have issues that, such as old buildings, storage of old documents, sick building and mold, and reports that the employees would have gotten ill, respiratory illnesses, medically examined. What is your response to those complaints? And I also wanted to get from you, what role does the Ministry of Health play in making a determination where this is concerned?
Well, to date, we have had 0 occupational diseases reported.
Sorry. Sorry.
I will ask our acting chief medical officer to also make a contribution at this point in terms of what the ministry is planning to do to ensure that we enhance the reporting requirements regarding the Osh Act.
In terms of the reporting requirements for the Osh Act, we have had discussions very recently with the Osh agency, and we have given a commitment in order to look at the strengthening of the reporting requirements. Prior efforts were made. As recent as last year, the chief medical officer would have written county medical officers of health that are the stewards of public health throughout the country to remind those officers in terms of ensuring that diseases are occupational incidents, accidents, and injuries are reported through the health system up to the chief medical officer and to then be forward those reports to the Occupational Safety and Health Agency. So plans are being re-energized in collaboration with the Osh agency to ensure that our physicians are, one, trained to increase the level of clinical suspicion, and in that regard, we do have internal resources in terms of occupational health physician specialists. So that is one plan in terms of internal training and sensitization to the frontline physician staff, whether they be in accident and emergencies or health centers. And then, of course, part of that training will ensure the greater compliance in terms of reporting through our internal chains up to the Ministry of Health, and for which we said before, Dr. Mark Allen, as the occupational specialist, is also going to be part of that solution. So that is what we do intend to do with recent discussions, and also to within the framework of the recent MOU that was signed between the Ministry and the Osh agency last year.
Thank you. In responding, this is the Ministry of Health again. In responding to our submissions, you stated in your mission, in your submissions that the ministry plays a central role in the administration of the OSH implementation. Could you identify and elaborate on what actually the ministry has done to fulfilling this critical role, and what the critical role has been so far?
Chairman and members, the role of the Ministry of Health as per the Osh Act and even within our own strategic objectives are several-fold. One is the Ministry of Health in of itself as a government ministry complying with the Osh Act in of itself. So as I said before, within our regional health authorities, we do have occupational health units and occupational specialists and managers in Osh that seek with the health and welfare of the employees within the health sector, whether they be in the regional health authorities or the Ministry of Health. The other key role, as envisioned in the Act, and several portions of the Act, are to deal with industrial establishments in general, and the role that when they would have acquired an accident or injury or illness by nature of coming to health institutions for treatment, that's the reactive phase. Those sorts of reports would come to the Chief Medical Officer for reporting to the Osh Authority, as well as in the Act it defines if the Chief Inspector through the Osh Agency has a serious accident or injury to report to the Chief Medical Officer for investigation. On the more proactive side, as I said, apart from the training to increase the level of clinical suspicion among physicians for persons who present, there also is a requirement in the Act for the relevant industrial establishments to employ, bearing their own cost, to have medical practitioners be involved in ensuring the health and welfare of their employees in terms of doing proactive medical examinations. All of that is within the purview of the Ministry of Health in terms of an oversight. So persons both in the public and private medical fields, that is the summary of the rules of the Ministry of Health.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just get straight to a matter that is close to my heart. Does the ministry plan to include persons with disabilities as stakeholders on the committees?
In terms of persons with disabilities to be members of the committee, once persons are willing or eligible to serve, the ministry, as far as I'm aware, has no objection to such an undertaking. So as far as I'm aware, there's no particular barrier or hindrance on that basis to serve in any capacity with respect to occupational safety and health.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the deficiencies or the improvement in the legislation, what, if any, has been suggested to the relevant ministry, probably Ministry of Legal Affairs or the line ministry in improving the legislation that so far has been proclaimed or activated?
If I may, through the chair. We've had a series of consultations, public consultations, and from those consultations, there have been a few areas that we've identified for particular focus. For instance, we have regulations pursuant to the Factories Ordinance by virtue of Section 98 of the Osh Act. However, these regulations are quite outdated because they're based on the 1948 Ordinance. So we're in the process of having those reviewed, replaced if necessary. We also have outlined approximately 10 pieces of regulations that we are in the process of doing policies for. We've done 6 thus far in draft. The authority has approved 4. Also, from the consultation, I would read from my notes some of the areas in particular.
Sure.
So it was agreed that there should be an overall increase in fines. The structure of the OSH authority and agency should be clarified or even revised. There should be an increase in OSHA's autonomy, for instance, something more akin to Regional Health Authority or the EMA. OSHA should be authorized to charge fees for certain functions. The power to prosecute under the Act should be clarified, because as it's stated, the inspector has that power, whereas in practice, it's normally done by counsel from the agency. We had one judgment, it was a green dot judgment that was raised, and it was decided that the action can be brought in the name of the authority, and therefore any of the representatives, the lawful representatives, could prosecute. But this is something that we need to have clarified or specifically stated. So, as I mentioned before, the subsidiary legislation should be amended. Definitions is also a very key area. As you alluded to it before, the imminent danger, there are several key definitions that are not included. For instance, not even the term accident is defined in the Act. The critical injury definition as well should be expanded and updated. Certificates required under the Act should be revised in terms of their duration. So far as it stands now, it's just a requirement to have certificates for certain things, but it was proposed that perhaps a time frame for expiration should be incorporated. Review the reporting requirements for notification of accidents in terms of time frames and requirements. We've had several views expressed that the time frames may be a little onerous. Also, it was suggested that it's not clear in terms of what needs to be reported. Again, going back to definitions, there's no definition of medical attention, which is one of the requirements for reporting. Going forward, guidelines for risk assessment should also be provided. The burden of proving the delay or delaying of an inspector should be lessened. As it stands now under the Act, it must be proven that there's willful delay in the provision of information to an inspector for an investigation. And we're saying that that is fairly onerous because you'll have to get, statements from persons willing to come forward to prove that this is some sort of deliberate act from their employers.
As opposed to being a neglect.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Also, the extent of the exclusion of residential premises should be clarified. As it stands here in our Act, also in the UK, residential premises are not covered by the Act. However, this is not to say, for instance, building contractors, performing work at a residence. It doesn't preclude or exclude the duty of the employer to make sure that certain policies and procedures are put in place prior to actually performing work on the premises.
Well, not just tell me flow, but let me just add something that jumped out to me. I don't want to forget it. Is that how do you deal with removing yourself in terms of workers, well, if they are considered workers, who are essential service members, like the prisons, the police officers, and how do you deal with issues of OSHA with those type of employees?
It's only under the refusal to work mechanism that those persons are excluded. They're not allowed to activate that procedure. However, they're still covered under the Act as a whole. I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, how that operates, I mean, enlighten us. If there's an eminent situation of eminent health risk for them, how do you deal with that? And there's a report to the agency. How do you all deal with that? And it's eminent. How do you deal with that?
Perhaps it's,
Have you ever had an issue like that?
perhaps it's
Well, when you look at it, if it is...
First of all, Chief Inspector, have you ever had an issue like that to be dealt with? The police or the prison officers?
I think there's the Roxborough Fire Station and there was the Point Fortin Fire Station.
And how was it dealt with?
Well, the Point Fortin Fire Station prohibition was issued for the Point Fortin Fire Station, and they have subsequently been removed from that station and housed elsewhere.
And that was determined on the basis of being imminent danger?
Yes, sir.
What was the danger there in that instance?
Well, as far as I'm aware, the flooring and the structural integrity of the building was compromised.
And in the recommendations of improving the Act, is anything being proposed to deal with that type of issue in a more comprehensive way, in a more effective way? Is it creating any challenges for the agency to implement where you have issues like that to deal with essential service? I mean, by its very nature, the essential services are exempted under the Industrial Relations Act from strike and so forth, right? So how is this being dealt with?
It is one of the areas that we propose to examine by looking at perhaps what is done in other jurisdictions, but we haven't actually put forward an agreed position as yet, but we are.
Okay, so you are looking into it?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. You wanted to ask something? Sorry, I don't mean to, were you finished with what you were saying before?
I was just about almost at the end. I think the last 2 points, 2 bullets. The procedure for prosecution of health and safety offenses should be outlined and clarified. Also, it was proposed that a commission should be established to deal with all prosecutions under the Act. As it is now, there is some ambiguity based on the definition of court under the Act. Part of it, court is a summary court, which is the magistrate's court. Then you have the industrial court. So the Act speaks to safety and health offenses, which are prosecuted in the industrial court, and then it also speaks to summary offenses, which are basically criminal. But there is a general position by the courts that they're all criminal offenses to be heard, before the industrial court. So, yes.
Sorry, before the industrial court?
Yes.
And your proposal is to do what?
To establish an independent commission to treat with all matters, and outline procedures specifically in relation to safety and health under the Act.
But when you have a matter that may be quasi-criminal, you will want the authority, that particular entity, to deal with it, or you will want it to go in the magistrate court? What is the other jurisdictions' experience or positions on that?
Well, in the UK, for instance, it's specifically stated that it's a criminal matter.
Right.
Our jurisdiction was not quite clear in terms of the nature of it.
But should we make it criminal?
I don't know what the view of the agency and authority is, but
I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but just in terms of experience and your experience locally, and then what you are gleaning from the experiences internationally, best practice now. Just from that perspective.
Best practice, jurisdictionally, these offenses are deemed criminal offenses.
Should be criminal. I mean, at the end of the day, health and safety issues are serious issues. I mean, affecting, as one of the members asked, about productivity. And if the agency can be properly resourced, I think it can assist in achieving productivity, definitely so, Member?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to follow up. I want to express appreciation to Mrs. John Behrens for your recommendations. And I wanted to ask, the chairman asked a question earlier about the inclusion of differently abled persons on the committee. But what I wanted to ask is if you had any recommendation for improvement to the Act and the procedures with regards to differently abled when it comes to access, their safety in case of an emergency evacuation and so on. Do you have any recommendations specifically to provide for persons who are differently abled?
Well, the Act as it stands now treats with all persons, and there's also that requirement for proper access and egress, which can also apply in situations such as for disabled persons. But it is something that recently we did decide to explore further in terms of our recommendations for amendment.
Because just to piggyback on that very critical intervention by Member Amin, which I do appreciate very much. And it would be remiss of me not to raise that, so I thank you very much for raising that. The fact is that the Act may have, at its present state, cater for all persons. When you're dealing with people that are differently able, there must be specific type of requirements to deal with that. I can tell you practically from it, because most times I go into a building, I'm very concerned how I'm getting out in terms of emergency. Because the best of us are trained to do this and do that in terms of emergency, but self-preservation always kick in most times, and people will exit for themselves. So why come into this building and say, if there's an emergency, what do I do? Do I fly wings as on my way out of a window or something like that? You know, so it's a serious concern, and I do concern myself in any building I go into. Where do you get out? Because no one knows exactly when a fire or emergency will take place. And we have seen what has gone on in England, first world country that we take precedence from in many instances, where there was an inferno with a structure and how many lives were lost, you know. So we want to be proactive and preemptive in preserving and protecting innocent lives and vulnerable lives. You know, so I think that's something needs to be dealt with urgently, because in terms of emergency, you may already have way how people can get out here in terms of getting out of a building. For an able-bodied person, you can you know, slide down. First thing they tell you, not to use an elevator in terms of a fire. What happens to a person who is in a wheelchair? What happens to a person who is blind, or any of those things? What are the specific requirements? You know. So those are serious issues that will, like you, when you're making your recommendations, that we can take on board to help amplify or to certainly have addressed in any amendments to take place. Yeah.
Thank you for your suggestion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask in relation to the amendments. Are they ready for submission to the Parliament to amend the Act?
As the PS indicated, they are actually now being reviewed by the Ministry of Labour, produce a policy document, and then also after that has to go to the Chief Parliamentary Council, so no.
I know just coming to the end of this, this has been very informative. Again, I mean, it has been qualitative in terms of the exchanges that has been taken place this morning, which I appreciate, because I think it has been a lot have been clarified in terms of following from our last inquiry. But what is the relationship? Do you think the agency, I think you may have hinted, one of you may have hinted to it, having the agency under the immediate supervision of the Ministry of Labour, is that a kind of a himself, looking upon himself kind of thing? I mean, do you all have is it a healthy relationship? Is it one that can be better strengthened by having a more separate existence, as being you're also housed in the Ministry of Health now? So isn't that so? You were once housed Ministry of Labour, not the Ministry of Health, but Ministry of Labour.
Some of us are housed in the Ministry of Labour's building on Duke Street, and some of us are over at Alexandra Street.
I mean, what of that relationship? How is it managed? Is it a
Well, we report to the Ministry of Labour on a monthly basis on our activities and also on our finances.
But the Ministry of Labour is also under your supervision, eh?
Yes, as well.
To see if they can help.
Yeah.
So, Madam PS, I mean, what do you think? Could it be better done by they being moved completely away from your stewardship and given a more independent existence to be more effective? I mean, because they are at some point in time policing you. That's like a hard question, eh?
It is. But it's one that is worth considering. But given the current structure and functioning of the agency, I cannot see that happening at this time in terms of their, the status of their employees being on contract.
Yeah, because I am envisaging a situation where the agency carries out an inspection based on a complaint from a work or something of the Ministry of, any of the Ministry of Labor as the case.
Yes, and we would seek to comply with.
And there's an eminent thing to close it down. I mean, you giving me my funds. They say he who controls or she who controls, the person controls. They say, how that go? I will see how that will look.
But that shouldn't prevent them from doing what they're required to do.
Yes.
We actually did that before. We had closed down the Duke Street, the Duncan Street office under the Ministry of Labor. We were inhabiting the building, but we had actually served the Ministry of Labor with the relevant documents to close it down.
I understood on the last occasion from one of the stakeholders that there is a possibility or there's an initiative to have your own building acquired or some landing. What is the update? Can you update us on what is the status? Have you all acquired the land? Or?
Well, we were allocated land in Balmain, Cuba, 2 acres, for building of a headquarters. We are now talking to the land management, the Commissioner of State Lands, so that they could vest the land with OSHA. And as the process that's currently ongoing, it's taken a while. Because we put that
Pierce has something to add, like she knows a little more. No?
Actually, it's the same information that the executive director would have shared.
All right, yeah. Yes, sorry, Ms. Sam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier, you indicated that the agency has held some consultations, tripartite and sectoral consultations, with a view to putting forward recommendations to amend the Act. And I wanted to ask if you have, out of those consultations, submissions received or the recommendations you have so far, and if you could supply the committee with those.
The list that DDL had read out came out of those consultations. We could provide the information.
Yes, if you could send it in writing.
Yeah.
And my other question was, most of your investigations are triggered by complaints, but certainly before you reach to the stage of having any accident or complaint, you do encourage employers to be compliant up front. Do you have a separate department that deals with inspection for this purpose, to certify them or to indicate that they are compliant, they are OSH compliant, even before a complaint takes place? You would have a list of requirements and so on.
We have a list of requirements, but we don't have a separate unit, the same unit that deals with complaints, accidents, the same 16 inspectors, and we have 7 Inspector 2s as well. They're the same people that would tend to prioritize these.
So what is your rate of inspection? You go to agencies interested in being compliant. They would have to get a visit, and then you tell them where they are falling short, and then give them some time to put those things in place, take a second visit. What is in terms of the number of inspections you have pending and the rate of investigation?
Currently, we have a target of 10 inspections per inspector per month. And we have a target of 4 inspections per Inspector 2 per month, which brings us to around 154 per month of the inspections that we do coming out of those complaints. We have a plan in place to start doing proactive inspections. So we are currently developing a list of the high-risk agencies and industrial establishments so that we could determine where we go first, second, third, just so that we could use the resources more effectively. So that is in train at the moment.
So with your current shortage of inspectors, have you been able to touch those?
Not really, because of the fact that we had put out this advertisement telling people to report more, our work has increased exponentially. So we have to deal with this influx because we have a duty first to those who report rather than going to look for new work. So that has really swamped us a bit in terms of the influx that has now started coming in.
Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to thank, I think we have reached, this has been a very informative session, which I appreciate very much. I want to thank all persons participating in this hearing this morning. I hope that the listening and viewing public have been enlightened by what has been exchanged between the committee and you members, stakeholders. The stakeholders also will have benefited from what you will have clarified, enlightened, and informed. My take on what I perceive as the critical situation with this organization is a lack of resources in every aspect of it, in terms of the monetizing the organization, in terms of the human capital required to do it, the sheer volume, in terms of even the physical structure, in terms of having a house, being housed in headquarters. And these are serious impediments. Our report certainly will reflect this in our deliberations. And I would like to thank the agency and the authority of their level of efficiency of achieving whatever 47% you said at this point in time is with what such limited and challenged resources. I think you are doing sufficiently encouraging execution of your mandate. And I hope that coming from this, we will be able to add our voice, add some sort of impetus in bringing it closer to a level of efficiency and resource that will make this be able to execute what is a critical area for this organization to play in our society, in which certainly will help in the productivity and loss and reduce the loss of man hours through these issues. So in closing, I would like to ask the acting PS to give a closing remark. I'm not going to stick you to 2 minutes. You can take it 3 minutes, and then I will ask again Mr. Radri and Dr. John Raj. So please, PS.
Thank you, Chair and members. In closing, I would just like to say thank you for the opportunity presented this morning in terms of providing the information and providing that clarification which the committee sought. We at the ministry, we recognize the impediments which you would have outlined facing the agency, and we are committed to addressing those in the shortest possible time. As I indicated, we would look to seek to increase the number of inspectors on the establishment of the agency so that they can effectively address the implementation of the Osh Act. Again, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. You are partnering with the $2,000, huh? The Ministry of Health?
The Ministry of Health will continue to work with the OSH agency to ensure that we meet our obligations and that we fully support the agency in its obligations. Thank you very much.
You were cleanly efficient. Thank you very much. Deputy, sorry. Yeah, it could be your presiding officer. Deputy.
No, thank you. No.
Yes? Yeah, sorry, please, could you start again? Yes.
As a relatively young agency, the Osh agency and authority are still experiencing some growing pains. However, we are giving the commitment that we will work steadfastly to really try to close the gaps to make us a world-class health and safety organization. And just can't underscore it enough. It is only through stakeholder engagement across Trinidad and Tobago that we could really develop a safety culture that will move us forward into the coming decades. And the only other point is, it is clear, the data shows that Fortune 500 companies, they have a very strong health and safety culture, and we should really try to model that and adopt learnings from those entities. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you all. In closing, I have a few announcements I would like to make. The public is advised that the committee's report on its inquiry into the efficiency and the effectiveness of the Statutory Authorities Service Commission was recently presented to the Houses of Parliament, and will be available for review on the Parliament's website. That is www.ttparliament.org. Some of the issues addressed in the report are as follows. 1, the relevance of the Statutory Authorities Service Commission. 2, the archived record management system that are being utilized by the Commission. 3, the vacancies within the Municipal Police Service. 4, the delays in the reporting of the disciplinary matters involving staff assigned to the children's homes. 5, the ability of the Commission to exercise effective oversight of entities such as the NLCB and the children's home. Again, I would like to thank you for your active participation and enlightenment to the public and for our purposes in helping to make this more productive and efficient society. You know, we all have a role to play, and if we all do individually our tasks, I certainly when it's put together, I believe it will bear fruits for us, and we live in a much more productive, healthy, and safe working environment in the country. This session was dealt with the public service. I guess at another time, we will probably look into the private enterprise, right? And again, thank you very much. This session is now adjourned. Thank you.